They always have these bright yellow, bright green tracksuits and kit, and it just you stand out even more. I felt like I was choosing between my two families when I was making that decision. If I did do bad, rather than it being like a punishment, I could just learn the lessons and try and do better next time. I actually graduated from Leeds Beckett the same year that I went to Rio. For Paris, I'd love to make the final. As you mentioned, I narrowly missed out on the final in Rio.
I am Jordan Rushworth, host of the Athlete Sit Down with Sport Endorse, where we chat to inspiring athletes to hear their unique journey into the world of sports. Sport Endorse are a global leader in connecting brands with the ideal athlete to forge powerful partnerships and increase exposure for both sides alike. With access to over 5,000 athletes across 90 different disciplines, Sport Endorse is your go-to platform to find a perfect athlete fit for your social media campaign, brand ambassador role, or keynote speaking engagement. Welcome back to another episode of the Athlete Sit Down, where we dive into the inspiring stories of elite athletes from around the world. Today we have a very special guest joining us, a trailblazer in the world of diving. He's a two-time Olympic diver and the first Jamaican male diver to ever compete at the Olympics. With his eyes set on Paris this summer, he is preparing for his third Olympic appearance. It's the amazing Yona Knight Wisdom. Yona, how are you today?
Hey Jordan, I'm doing good, thank you.
Perfect. So we'll start with how you got into such an impressive sport in the first place. So tell us about your story and how you originally got into diving.
So I started diving when I was 9 years old. I was pretty much just in the right place at the right time, at the right age, with the right level of talent, because the diving club from Leeds, which is where I'm from, came into my school. They were doing a load of schools testing to identify potential divers that could potentially, be turned into Olympic divers in the future. And they came into my school, and funnily enough, it was the only time they've ever gone to that particular school. They've never been before, and they've never been since. And they came and tested my year group. We had to do like a load of gymnastics-based tests, and I did gymnastics previously to that happening. So I was basically really good at all the tests and fit the profile for what they were looking for to, potentially be developed into an Olympic diver. That was the goal of the program. So I got invited to go back to the pool and joined maybe 40 or 50 other kids that got selected to the next level. And following a little bit more testing in the pool, I was selected to the TID program, which stands for Talent Identification. And I joined the program, started diving, loved it from day one, and just never stopped doing it. And 20 years later, I'm still going.
So do a lot of divers have sort of a gymnastics background then?
It's helpful, but it's not necessary. They might not necessarily have a gymnastics background. For example, Tom Daly, one of the best divers that British diving has ever had, and Jack Law. I think he's won just a few medals less than Tom. Neither of them had gymnastics background, but for me, it really helped me because as I developed in the sport, as I grew and got taller and got heavier, my gymnastics background allowed me to do a lot of skills in the way that I might not have been able to with my body shape. So it definitely helped me out quite a lot, but it's not 100% required for diving.
Okay. And you sort of mentioned that they came into your school looking for divers. What was the support like as you progressed through to obviously becoming a Team Jamaican diver right now?
The support was more in terms of the fact of the coaching at that time was really, really of a high quality. The coach that ran that talent identification program, he was a Dutch Olympic diver. He had been to 2 Olympic Games and won a world championship gold medal. So he was a very, very talented diver himself. And he was able to teach us the key details of the foundations of diving. So when the foundations are solid, that is valuable to the future and potentially creating a high quality athlete. And for me, I managed to turn those foundations into world-class diving. Not all of those divers did in my TID cohort. It was actually probably one of the most successful ones. We had 3 Olympians, including myself, from that cohort. But obviously, over the years, due to various reasons, people drop out and, they move on into their life doing different things, maybe different sports, or they don't enjoy diving as much as they thought they might. So the squad slowly got smaller and smaller, and I'm actually the last standing TID from that generation in 2004, which is pretty awesome. But it shows that the foundations that the coach put in place at that point was really, really good, because it's allowed me to have this really long and successful diving career. And following that point, I was aiming to represent Great Britain, obviously being found in Leeds, developing in the British diving system. The goal was to represent Great Britain, but again, I grew quite a lot, and I had a very, very competitive age group. There were some really good divers across the country that were the exact same age as me. And it was really hard to make any junior teams. It was really hard to make any junior programs. And again, my body shape didn't help me. I had a few strengths, but also a lot of weaknesses that the selectors didn't necessarily like about me. So they chose, or maybe not that they didn't like about me, but the other divers just looked better at that age, and they were preferred over me. So that was quite tough, but the opportunity for Jamaica came around. It was a suggestion from one of my coaches, and it was a tough decision. But once I made that decision, it just opened up so many doors for me. And it was a case of supporting myself, finding others to help me along the way, but relying on myself to get me to where I wanted to be, which is what sport is all about.
Yeah, and you sort of mentioned that you made that step. Was that when you knew that you could make a career out of diving, or was it before or after that?
It was in the hope that I could make a career-ish out of it, because I say ish because, diving is not a particularly well-paid sport. It's not contracted. If you're on the British diving program, you might get some funding from UK Sport, which is great, but it's pretty hard to get that, and there's only a select few athletes that can get that. So yeah, it's hard to see it as a professional career, but I've definitely approached it as a professional, because that was the only way that I could see myself being successful. I watched the Olympic Games when I was 9, when I literally just started diving. I watched Athens 2004, saw some diving at the Olympics, and I wanted to be a part of it. So I knew I wanted to make the Olympic Games. I just didn't know how I was going to do it, or whether it was even going to be possible. When the Jamaica opportunity became a thing, that's when that particular goal actually became somewhat realistic. But I had a long way to go to make it possible, because I had never done international competitions. I had a lot of dives to learn. I had a lot of things to improve in terms of the quality of my dives. And I only had 4 years to do it, from 2012 to 2016. So it was a little bit of a race against time, but I learned some harsh lessons during that period, and changed a lot about my lifestyle, and really got focused on the task at hand, and managed to make it work and make the games in 2016.
Yeah. And you've been recorded as saying, I'm 190 centimeters tall, 90 kg heavy, and a black diver. Watch a diving event, and that is not something you'll see very often. What was it like feeling like you stood out like this in the diving world?
It's funny. I always took it as a positive, and actually, when I started representing Jamaica, it tied into that even more, because I was the only Jamaican diver. And what Jamaica are like at international competitions, they always have these bright yellow, bright green tracksuits and kit, and it just you stand out even more. And because of the heritage of Jamaica as a track and field nation, as soon as you put that tracksuit on, you get second and third glances. Just, oh, is that a track athlete? Or so there's definitely a little bit more focus that's brought on you when you're representing Jamaica. But in terms of how I actually look, I definitely did stand out from a younger age, but I'd almost grown up with people that I was diving against. So it's a very white dominated sport. And actually, when I went to school, it was a white dominated school. So I was kind of a minority in both aspects, but I never felt uncomfortable in either aspect. I felt like I fitted in from an intellectual standpoint at school, and from a talent standpoint at diving. So I never felt like an outsider. And actually, the people around me, they were very nice, very friendly, and supported me very well. But yeah, the size thing, it definitely caught people's eye, and I tried to use that to my advantage as much as possible as I progressed through my career. And then, yeah, as I said, Jamaica made that even more so, and I've actually thoroughly enjoyed it because it's been cool to do something different and be unique in a sporting world where it's, I think, becoming increasingly difficult to be unique, as it becomes so saturated. There's so many athletes. It's so hard to stand out in this world, and I've had the best opportunity to do that, and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and you mentioned obviously this Jamaican opportunity came about. How did it come about? Did they sort of reach out to you, or did you reach out to them and think?
Yeah, it came from my coach. Actually, my coach had the belief that I could make it to an Olympic Games and I could make it as a successful diver, but he just didn't see me getting selected in the British program because, as I mentioned, it was a very competitive age group, and there were some other really, really good divers, including Jack, who's gone on to win multiple Olympic medals. So, yeah, he suggested to me to have a think about it and see if I wanted to represent one of my parents' nation. Jamaica is my dad's side, Barbados is my mum's side, and I felt like I was choosing between my two families when I was making that decision. But I reached out to both swimming associations, and the Jamaica opportunity just stood out even more. And as I already mentioned, the heritage of Jamaica as a track and field nation, it just stands out so much more. So I felt like that could potentially benefit me in the future. And, also the little known guy called Usain Bolt, who is a bit of an icon in the athletics world, the prospect of being on the same team as him at some point was a factor in my decision for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, everyone knows Usain Bolt and sort of the 100-meter sprinters. But you went from sort of having zero experience in the international diving world to becoming a World Cup silver medalist and almost an Olympic finalist. You missed out by 8 points in the sort of space of 4 years. How was this possible?
Yeah, it was possible with the support that I received, so from my coaches and from family and friends and the teammates that I was training with. We had a really high quality diving program in Leeds with, I think it was maybe like 5 or 6 of the 11 team members that went to Rio in 2016 were from Leeds. There had many divers that went to the London Olympic Games, so there was a lot of very internationally experienced divers and 3 very high quality coaches in Leeds. So it just became it became on me to knuckle down and just get my head down and work hard, listen to the coaches, listen to what they were telling me, try and make the changes that they wanted, and, just give my all. I also got some support from Levi Roots, the guy that did Reggae Sauce. He helped to fund all of my travel and accommodation when I went to compete for Jamaica, which without his support, I wouldn't have been able to gain all the experience at international competitions that I needed. And the greatest thing about his support is that it came with no pressure. I didn't have any performance standards to meet. I didn't need to get any points. I didn't need to win a certain number of medals or make any finals to continue getting his support. I could go to all these competitions, obviously not with the intention of doing bad, but if I did do bad, rather than it being like a punishment, I could just learn the lessons and try and do better next time. And over a 4-year period of learning some really tough lessons, I had a lot of difficult results that, affected me personally. But it was never a negative. It was always something that I could try and improve on next time. And eventually the time came around in 2015 where the Olympic qualifications started happening, and I was still quite far off where I needed to be. So I decided that, I needed to make a few lifestyle changes. So stop living the university life, because I was at uni at the time as well. Stop going out, stop drinking, make sure I was eating well, make sure I was sleeping well, getting a lot of rest, make sure that I was recovering well from my training every single day, because I actually had the quote as my screensaver on my phone, but it was, every day is another chance to make a dream come true. And I would see that every single day, even if I woke up and I wasn't feeling particularly great, or, I didn't fancy training that day, I would see that quote and it would energize me enough to be able to go into training and give my best, even if my best wasn't amazing at that point, it was better than doing nothing, and it would still have a positive impact in terms of the accumulation of skill over that period of time. So yeah, 2015 was a big turning point. I finished 38th at that World Championships. I needed top 12 to qualify for the games from that one, so I was way off. And in 6 months' time, I was able to turn that 38th position into a World Cup silver medal and an Olympic spot because of just the tunnel vision that I went into in pursuit of my dream.
Yeah, my next question was going to be sort of that you'd achieved this alongside your degree at Leeds Beckett University in sport and exercise science. You got a 2-1, and I was going to ask, how did you sort of balance these both? But I guess the sort of answer you sort of gave was that you didn't really balance them both. If you sort of moved towards the diving when you needed to, and then I guess once you'd done that, you then moved back a little bit. Is that sort of correct in saying?
Fortunately, sports science isn't the most difficult course that there is. I definitely learned a lot from it, and it was actually beneficial in that it gave me something to focus on away from the pool. So I was actually quite grateful to have it, because when I finished training, I might have had an assignment to write or do some work to catch up on in the day, and it allowed me to just like switch off from my training session, forget about what I'd done, whether it was good or bad, focus on my uni, and then the next day was a new day, and I could start afresh at training and just give my best again. But I actually graduated from Leeds Beckett in the same year that I went to Rio. So it was kind of a crescendo to two pretty big moments in my life. And they kind of went hand in hand to a certain extent. But it was about finding balance. You know, my first year at uni, I wanted to enjoy a bit of the uni lifestyle, and you know, I moved out from home. I went into halls, even though I was just around the corner from home. And, you know, I definitely had a good time, and still maintained a reasonable balance, because at that point, it was way too early to get fully involved in the whole Olympic pursuit, because I had so much to learn. So after first year, that's when I slowly started to narrow the focus down a little bit more towards diving, but also then doing less of the extra uni things, and making sure that not only was I getting my work done in advance enough to not have to worry about doing it at a competition, or not worrying about resits in the summer. So I could actually put my focus on the diving when the diving came around, which I think helped my university. But it also helped my diving because, you know, I was able to switch on and off from it and not get too caught up in the emotions of the journey, and just kind of let the time just take its course, you know?
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because you'd think that maybe because you're doing so well in the diving that your sort of uni grade may have dropped, but you think that both sort of helped each other out, which is, yeah, very interesting. So what's sort of been your biggest challenge as an athlete, and how did you overcome it?
So the biggest challenge was definitely my size. Obviously, being tall is difficult for diving because somersault speed is slower in the air. I probably drop a little bit quicker than some of the other divers. So I struggled to do the same difficulty of dives that they could. And that put me at a disadvantage, because I had to then try and execute my dives better to get the same amount of points. So that was a challenge. I struggled with a few knee injuries as I was growing, which wasn't ideal, but also kind of fueled my fire to you know, recover from it so I could be with my friends at the competitions. But you know, some of those negatives, especially my stature, actually became a positive, because, you know, being tall, it made my lines in the air and some of my dives look a little bit more graceful and more beautiful to watch. So when I got my dives right, they got rewarded by the judges because it looked really good. Also from my size, again, because of the foundation that I had, I was able to use the springboards really well. So I was jumping a lot higher than some of the other athletes. And with how high I jumped, that allowed me to start to do some of the more difficult dives that the other divers were doing. So then it became slightly less of a disadvantage, even though I couldn't maybe do them well as often, and it was maybe a longer learning process. But the biggest challenge was just simply representing Jamaica was hard because I didn't have the support that some of the others have. And I'm not just talking about financial support, I'm talking physio, nutrition, psychology, a lot of the things I had to learn for myself. So a lot of the psychological strategies that I use for training and for competition are things that I learned when I was at university and studied them in my psychology module, and, tried and tested, see, kind of figured out what worked, figured out what didn't work, and eventually came up with strategies that were effective for me rather than sitting and working with a psychologist and kind of getting told what to do. But again, that disadvantage kind of turned into an advantage because it was way more ingrained in me. I feel like I understood it a lot more and I understood myself a lot more. So I became much more independent than maybe some of the other athletes. So I could really look after myself, which I think is not only a positive for sport, but also a positive for life. And, hopefully they're lessons that I can take forward. So yeah, with physio, for example, I couldn't get regular physio. I had to just manage my body myself as much as possible, making sure that I was communicating with my coach if something was hurting or if something was not feeling right. I could make adjustments here and there. Again, making me really independent. But it was tough. It was tough because it's more difficult to achieve such a big thing when you don't have that support. But then again, it was all down to me. No one else really had a say in whether I was going to be successful or not. It depended on how much I wanted it, and fortunately, I was able to convert that into the success that I wanted.
No, I agree. I think instead of just doing what you're told and not understanding why, you realize why you were doing what you were doing and sort of making the decisions for yourself, which I think definitely could have been a positive. Yeah. But you also mentioned that it was sort of harder representing Jamaica due to the support. Did the choice to become the first male diver ever to represent Jamaica and sort of the Caribbean islands sort of add extra pressure, not to do with the support, but to do with sort of having a whole nation on your back looking at you?
Yeah, no, it didn't really add any pressure, to be honest, because until I got to Rio, there was no expectation for me to get to Rio. So the pressure kind of came maybe afterwards in terms of trying to make it to another games. But the external pressure, I've always said the external pressure has never been higher than the internal pressure that I put on myself and my personal expectations of how I approach training, of how I compete. And once I made the decision to go for world-class diving, I always wanted to dive well. I always wanted to compete well. I always expected the highest standards of myself. And that was also partly due to the people that I was around because they were, again, really, really good divers. So, I was comparing myself to some of the world's best on a day-to-day basis. So that definitely raised my own personal expectations. But yeah, the external pressure was never higher than the internal pressure, which I guess it has its positives and negatives. But it definitely kept me motivated in a healthy way to keep on pushing because, you mentioned the why, like the why was never for an external reason. It was never to gain, money or prizes or whatever. It was always for my personal satisfaction. That was my why. I wanted to make the Olympic Games because it was my dream. It was not someone else's dream that, they had kind of bestowed upon me. It was my dream. It was what I wanted. And when I achieved it, I could only thank myself, as well as many other people that did help me. But I could only thank myself because without my drive, without my motivation, I wouldn't have been able to achieve it. And then similarly going into Tokyo and going to Paris, but for different reasons. It was all, my why was all about my own personal satisfaction of why I wanted to make the Olympic Games, what it meant for me personally, not what it meant for other people. And I think that's so important when things are internalized in that way. It's so much more powerful than an external prize, because say if that external prize is taken away or the potential of even getting that is removed because it becomes unrealistic or because someone else comes in to take that, then, how do you find motivation and how do you keep on pushing forward? and then it's a bit easier to find yourself in a difficult situation then, I think, as an athlete. So I don't think I made a conscious decision for my why to be so internalized, but I'm grateful that it was, because it's allowed me to progress so far, I think, in the sport.
Are you a brand seeking an influencer to enhance trust and visibility with your audience? Or are you an elite athlete eager to feature in advertisements or promote products on social media? We're a unique platform connecting top-tier athletes with brands for impactful partnerships in your area. For brand managers, we simplify dealings with athletes and celebrities. For athletes, we offer opportunities to collaborate with like-minded brands. With a strong global community, Sport Endorse is your gateway to success. www.sportendorse.com, where brands can book a free demo on the platform, while athletes can sign up for free.
Yeah, and you sort of mentioned your why there in your internal motivation. Did that all feel like it was worth it when you won that silver medal in the 2019 Pan America Games?
Absolutely. Any successful competition, not even in terms of a medal, but just in terms of meeting my own goals for the competition or doing a good list of dives that felt good, it made all the effort worthwhile. So, for example, the Commonwealth Games in 2022, I had set myself a target of winning medals in both 1 meter and 3 meter. And that was a realistic target. I was diving well at the time, and, there were a lot of good divers, but I felt that if I was at my best level, then I'd be well within a chance of winning that medal. And I dived really well in both events, but I finished 5th on 1 meter and 6th on 3 meter, just because the other divers dived better. But I wasn't disappointed because I didn't get a medal. I was actually really happy with myself and really proud of myself because I did my best performance. So I think, fortunately for me, I haven't won many medals in my diving career, but it wasn't all about medals for me, which has been good. And the medals that I have won have been extra special, and I've enjoyed them that little bit more because it was almost so unrealistic for me to even get anywhere near world and international medals for diving. So yeah, they're all very special to me, and it makes every single minute of training and every difficult situation absolutely worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree. And just getting to sort of the 3 Olympics now you're about to be in, it's sort of a massive achievement in itself. Sort of, what is it like going to the Olympics and sort of doing the opening ceremony, being in the Olympic Village?
Well, I've had 2 very different experiences so far. Obviously with Rio, it was a totally normal games, but in a very, I'd say, unique country in terms of Olympics. As hosts, because it was the first games in South America. Rio was in some ways a developing country, but in other ways, a very prosperous country. And you definitely saw both elements of that whilst you were there. The opening ceremony of the Maracanã was unbelievable. Seeing the Olympic flame lit and walking out into the stadium were moments that, I will never forget. The way that they made me feel. And then obviously Tokyo was completely different, being under the COVID restrictions. Again, walking out into that stadium was iconic for a different reason, because you could literally hear the echoes of the music and the volunteers trying to keep everyone excited, because it was this massive bowl of an arena that was just empty. But the show was great, and still seeing the Olympic flame lit filled me with emotions and feelings that not many other things could do because of the history of it. Watching Beijing on TV, watching London on TV, and seeing those moments, dreaming and imagining myself in that moment and actually being there is crazy. So yeah, I'm very excited for Paris to return to normal. Obviously, it's a very unique opening ceremony on the River Seine, hopefully, and yeah, that's going to be a phenomenal experience. But being a part of the games is I spend the majority of my time just walking around and smiling, because I just can't believe I'm in that situation, to be honest.
Yeah, and obviously you are going to the Paris Olympic Games. How do you prepare for that? So what have you been doing the last few weeks? What will you be doing leading up to it and sort of before your sort of sport takes place?
So we have blocks of training in a normal season anyway, so it doesn't really change from normal. I'll have like a pre-season block earlier in the year, which I've already kind of been through. leading up to the World Championships in Doha, where I qualified. So leading up to that one, it was, a period of strength building, then a period of speed building, and then a taper going into the competition. And then it's essentially just repeating the same process again. Now, I had a number of competitions after Doha, so spent a lot of time traveling around and not really in a consistent period of training. But the last few weeks I've been able to have that. So I've been able to go through my strength block of weights and getting the power and all the foundations in my legs that I need. And then converting that slowly into a bit more speed and a little bit more sharpness and a bit more energy. And I'm just now coming towards the end of that block. And I'll go into my taper, which is when everything will get a little bit easier in the gym and in the conditioning side of things, but it'll become a little bit more about preparing my dives and trying to perfect them as much as possible in training to get ready for the competition. Because, whilst I'm in those strength and speed blocks, I'm still training my competition dives, but I'm not doing them to execute them perfectly every single time. I'm doing them to try and improve technique, make little changes, little tweaks that I can do to try and extract a few more points from the judges, maybe if I do the dive well, if I'm able to actually compete it well. So again, I'm coming towards the end of that tweaking period, and everything's becoming a little bit more settled now, and I know what I'm doing on each dive, and it's just about trying to execute it as well as possible every single time now. And then I've got about 4 weeks until my actual competition, so it's still a lot of time, but over this next 4 weeks, it'll just slowly become more about specific competition preparation. So competition simulations in training where my coach will score me, or we might even make a little wager or a little bet where if I achieve something, I get it, or if I don't achieve it, I have to give her something. So, little games, fun things like that challenge me. Obviously, you can never really replicate the competition feeling, such as you can never replicate what a penalty shootout would feel like, but you can do your best to challenge yourself in different ways, and we're definitely doing that at the moment.
Yeah, I was about to ask that. How do you sort of replicate? Because it's impossible, I assume. But as soon as you sort of step up to that sort of springboard, is the sort of adrenaline controllable? Obviously, I've never been in a sort of situation like that, so I don't know how it feels.
Yeah, it obviously becomes more controllable over time, and with experience, it becomes less of a big deal, basically. So, you can get on the board and you have your psychological strategies, you have your physiological strategies that you can do to help control that adrenaline, or potentially boost it if you need to feel a little bit more energetic for a dive, So it can go both ways, and it's about knowing yourself, knowing what you need to be ready for a particular dive, because each dive is different. Each dive requires a different preparation. So in training, I can do little bits to try and prepare that. For example, in Doha, where I qualified, there was 70 divers in the prelim. So it was almost an hour between each dive, which is crazy. So, you sit down for a little while, you might have a little walk around, but then you have to get up and get ready for the dive, do a little warm up. And then when you get on that board, you literally haven't been on the board for about an hour, and you've got to try and do the dive the best that you can. So in training, the way that I tried to replicate that was by just doing one dive and then sitting out for 10 minutes, and then doing a quick warm up, and then doing my next dive. And obviously I'm not going to do a 6-hour training session to exactly replicate it, but you get the feeling of it. So the Olympics will be a little bit shorter. I think there's mid-20s in the event, so I don't have to go as extreme as that, but I can do similar things in my training session now to start to try and replicate the feeling of competition. But as I said, I always want to dive well, so I'm always aiming to do my dives as well as possible in training, no matter what. It's just about executing the technique as well as possible.
And you mentioned before that you have sort of personal targets. What are your personal targets for the Paris Olympics?
For Paris, I'd love to make the final. As you mentioned, I narrowly missed out on the final in Rio, which would have been unreal at my first games. Then I was a little bit further away in Tokyo, but still pretty close. I made it through to the semi-final. So this time around, the challenge is to have a good prelim, to progress through to the semi, and then to have a good semi-final, which I haven't done on the previous 2 occasions, to be able to progress through to the final. And if I can do that, that'll be an absolute dream come true.
Yeah, definitely. So sort of post diving, you sort of mentioned that you sort of plan on coaching. What valuable lessons have you sort of learned in your journey as a professional athlete that you feel like you could pass down?
Yeah, well, as we mentioned before, there was a lot of independence that came into my diving career. And there's lots of things that I had to understand from a coach's perspective to help me bring out the best in myself. So I feel like not that I've been coaching myself for a long time, but I've been almost looking from my coach's perspective at myself as much as possible, so that I've not just been doing what I've been told to do. I've been understanding the reasons as to why I'm told to do it. So, the training cycles, the season progression. I feel like I understand that all really well to the highest level at, the Olympics, World Championships. So hopefully as a coach, I can, first of all, hopefully get some high performance divers to coach. And then if I am able to do that, then I can guide them in their journey to the highest level of diving with more efficiency than my own journey, because I can hopefully share with them some of the lessons that I've learned and hopefully make them, just skip out some of the difficult parts. Even though the difficult parts are valuable, help them learn the lessons a little bit quicker than I did myself. And that should hopefully, be able to further their careers. But I need to get some divers first.
Well, that's a good point. You sort of Jamaica. You're the first Jamaican coach. Do you plan on coaching sort of for Jamaica or sort of Team GB, or does it not sort of matter?
I'm hoping for a bit of both almost. So I'm hoping to stay in the UK, hopefully get a role in the UK coaching, but also my plans outside of that are to develop diving in Jamaica. So after the games this summer, I'm going straight to Kingston to run the second year of my diving camp out there and get some more people involved, get some more people interested in diving, just teach some of the basic techniques. And then from there, I want to kind of create an organization and hopefully get some sponsorship in to invest in the development of the program, because there's a lot that needs to happen. There needs to be a coach out there full time. There needs to be improvement in facilities and support for athletes to make it more accessible for people just to even learn how to swim, because that is something that isn't common in Jamaica already. So I have lots of things that I'd like to achieve in that respect. But yeah, the goal is to set the foundations right now and try and get some investment in, so that that investment can be used to slowly build not only a diving program, but aquatics in Jamaica, hopefully maybe even link with tourism, because I think there's some opportunities in that respect. People would love to use Jamaica as a warm weather training camp, I'm sure, but they need the facilities to match. So we need to get that set up first.
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible, although sort of Jamaica may not be sort of, well, as you said, not known for its diving. It is known in the Olympics, obviously due to sort of Usain Bolt and the track and fields. I think that would be a sort of great solution for that.
Well, Jamaica have some very, very talented athletes, and I'm more than certain that those talents don't only lie with track and field. I'm sure those talents can lie in other sports, and there's a lot of similarities to track and field with diving. For example, just the power that is required, the speed of thinking. So I definitely think I could find some good Jamaican divers.
Absolutely. And sort of what valuable lessons have you learned from your experience? Obviously, you talk about sort of how you've coached yourself, your sort of internal motivation. Does that also, and obviously uni life as well, does that also impact your personal life? Does that improve that aspect of your life as well?
Yeah, it's been a tough balance, especially recently, because I feel like I've had to get so much more locked into diving. Through the pandemic, I felt like I just had to be super narrow-minded within it. And then I had my knee injury in 2022, and to get back from that to the highest level again, I felt like I had to go super narrow-minded to to focus on it. And that has meant that I've had to sacrifice a number of things personally. You know, I've not lived the normal life of someone in their 20s, but I've gained so many more experience than many other people in their 20s. So again, it kind of balances out. But yeah, it definitely does affect the personal life in some aspects. But, you know, you can just try your best to not get too caught up in it, because, you know, at the end of the day, sport isn't everything. It's important if you're in it, and if you want to do well at it, you have to commit 100%. But also, you know, other aspects of life are very important, which is why I wanted to go to university, because I knew that getting a degree would be important, because sport doesn't last forever. So hopefully I can use that degree for my benefit in the future. And, you know, relationships are always a little bit difficult unless you have someone that actually understands it. And I've had both sides of it, and definitely dating an athlete has helped because she understands what I do a little bit more, because she's very much the same way with her sport. So it works out really well in that respect. But I can kind of, in terms of the lessons that I've learned that I can transfer into just life, I can narrow it down into 4 words, I think, and all those words start with P. For me, is a plan. Like, to have a plan is very important. To be patient is very important in life, because things don't always happen when you expect them to happen. And if you just wait a little bit, then, you know, you never know what's around the corner, for positive or for negative. But if you put yourself in a good situation, then it might be positive. You have to be persistent. If you want something, you have to completely persist and give it everything. Even if you get told no, you got to just keep on going. And the last one is positivity. I try and be positive as much as possible. I do complain a lot to my coach, but complaining does help me get through. But it's always positive, constructive complaining. But overall, I'm a very positive person. I have an optimistic outlook on life, and you know, I have positive ambitions, and I think that's what has allowed me to be successful in my career so far. So those things I think I can very much transfer into normal life, and hopefully they pay their dividends in the future.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely also something you can pass down to sort of the people you coach as well. And I'm sure you'll be a great role model for them. So who is sort of, have you had any role models or influences yourself in your life?
Yeah, I mean, Usain Bolt was 100% one. Even before I made the decision to represent Jamaica, I saw him, I watched on TV when he raced in Beijing, and that's a moment that stands out for me, watching him, you know, run down the 100-meter with his arms out basically halfway down. It was phenomenal. He's a massive role model for me. Lewis Hamilton is another one. And actually, I was just at the British Grand Prix yesterday and got to see...
You saw him win yesterday.
Yeah, and that was my first ever Grand Prix experience. I've been a Formula One fan for a long time, and I remember following Lewis ever since he came into the sport. So watching his rise, you know, is phenomenal, and the message that he also gives is amazing, and it's very inspiring for me. So yeah, to be at Silverstone for his first win in almost 1,000 days was pretty special for me yesterday. Yeah, they're probably two of my main inspirations, and I mean, you can see there straight away, a role model has to actually represent you in some way, shape, or form. And those are both black role models that I've selected from a young age. There was never any black divers that I could essentially pick as a role model that really looked like me. So, you know, hopefully I can be that for someone in the future. You know, a younger diver that is not what you normally see in diving. Hopefully they can see me and think, if he can do it, then maybe I can do it.
Absolutely. And sort of being that sort of role model for those divers, what advice would you give to sort of upcoming sports people out there wanting to be the best at their sport, perhaps swimming or anything else, and sort of go to the Olympics? What advice would you give them?
I think my first bit of advice actually would be to not get caught up in it too soon, because so many things can happen as you progress. You know, you can have your goal, you can have your target, but you don't need to be a professional from the age of 10 or the age of 12. You know, you have to be able to enjoy life and enjoy the sport. It shouldn't feel like a job from the age of 12, you know? So I definitely say to young people in sport to find the balance and enjoy life as much as possible, as well as trying to do their best in their sport, because that's very important. But at some point you have to commit, and when you're ready to commit, you got to give 100%, because talent alone is not enough anymore. I mentioned, I think at the start, that it's hard to stand out, it's hard to be unique, because it's so saturated. And the same thing is with talent. You get the once in a generation talent that comes through every once in a while, but those people are special and they're almost like aliens. I mean, you can look at Jude Bellingham right now. Like, I struggle to even be inspired by his career so far, because it feels so fake. Like, I don't understand how he can be that good so quickly and for everything to go so well. He's almost an alien. But even though he's so talented, he's worked hard to get where he needs to get. So you have to put the graft in, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, Jude moved away when he was 16 from Birmingham, didn't he, all the way to Germany. So he sort of committed, but it's worked out for him, but it doesn't work out for everyone. Absolutely. I guess is what you're trying to say. Yeah. So you have to have that balance. But I'll move on to sort of Sport Endorse's Fast Five. As I say, quick fire questions. If you could be another athlete, who would you be?
Probably Lewis Hamilton. It's a fun lifestyle.
Do you do go-karting a lot?
No, I've done it in the past, but I've actually got a single-seater experience at Silverstone later this year after the games, which I'm very excited for. So yeah, I'm buzzing to try that. See how
is that a little present for yourself?
Yeah, it was a birthday gift from my girlfriend, actually.
Oh wow, that would be a great experience. What is a brand you use that people may be surprised by?
A brand I use that people may be surprised by. I'm not very good with brands. I'm not a very stylish person in terms of dress, but probably Budgie Smuggler. They're the swimwear sponsor that I use, and they have some very standout designs, which often take people by surprise, I guess. So yeah, I'd probably say Budgie Smuggler.
If you were not an athlete, what would you be?
Potentially a musician.
Okay. Do you play an instrument?
When I was younger at school, I played the cello and I played the drums up until grade 5. So I was not bad at both. And I only stopped because I didn't want to do music theory. But my dad used to be in a reggae band when he was younger in the UK called the Bedrocks. And they got to actually record at Abbey Road, where the Beatles recorded. Wow. And also my auntie in Barbados, she is the conductor of the Barbados National Orchestra. So I've got a very musical family.
Yeah, so you sort of took a step away being a diver instead of following that route. What is your favourite movie?
Cool Runnings. Iconic.
Cool Runnings, that's great.
Iconic.
What's your party trick?
Amongst non-divers, being able to do a back somersault on the floor is always pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess everyone who's a diver can do that.
So outside the diving world, then that's definitely a party trick.
Yeah. And the sort of question the last guest left was, if you wanted to be remembered for something as a sports person, what would it be?
I've always wanted to have a really positive legacy as a sports person, where I not only achieved for myself, but I also created opportunities for others. So I think that's essentially what I'm trying to do with Jamaica. Obviously, the whole point of that is to create opportunities for young Jamaican kids to be able to do another sport potentially other than track and field out there. So yeah, the legacy is important.
Yeah, I guess having that sort of goal to make sure that you're not the last Jamaican diver is sort of a legacy in itself. And what question would you leave? Will you leave the next one?
So I'll say I'm a massive sports fan. I love watching other sports. It gives me a lot of energy, even for my own sport. So I'd like to ask, what is their favourite sport to watch and why? That's not their own sport.
And I'm guessing yours is Formula 1.
Yeah, Formula 1, absolutely.
Why Formula 1, if I may ask?
I've just found it so thrilling the past few years. I used to watch it. My dad used to watch it when I was younger, so I'd watch it with him. Saw Lewis Hamilton come into it, but then with the Drive to Survive series, it showed me all the details behind the scenes and all the kind of battles that go on that you don't really see if you just watch the race, which is kind of what I did when I was younger. So now that I'm a bit older and I can appreciate all of that, I'm so locked into it because it's about so much more than just who wins on a weekend. There's so much more to it, and it's a cool world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. I love watching Formula One as well. But yeah, Yona, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I think you're an absolute role model for sort of bringing these or having the goal that Jamaica, you're not the last Jamaican diver. And I hope you're very successful in that. And I also hope you're very successful at the Paris Olympics. I know I'll be watching you, and I hope sort of everyone else is as well. All of Yona's links will be below. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for watching The Athlete Sit Down, brought to you by Sport Endorse. To book any of our athletes featured on our podcast, contact us via our website, www.sportendorse.com, or via our email, hello@sportendorse.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes.